Good afternoon. It is Monday, June 10th, 4:45, and quorum present in chambers. I call this Human Resources Committee to order. First on our agenda is approval of the April 8th and May 13th minutes. They're in your packet. Any questions? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to accept. Motion by Gisselman, second by Martins. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Human Resources Report for May 2024. It's in your packet. Any questions for the director? Seeing none, we will put that on file. Next, presentation on the current animal control program and 2025 proposed model.
Yeah, it's pretty good right now.
I'm told when we did this earlier. All right, I think we're ready. So my name is Tegan Troutner. I'm an assistant city attorney for the city here. With me today is Caitlin Bernardi. She's your city clerk. And we also have Captain Nate Seiler. He's with the Wausau Police Department. So you guys should have received in your packet some comments that were placed in there on this presentation. I'm just going to do a brief little summary. Well, I'm a lawyer, so brief might be different than what real brief is. And then I'm going to let Nate and Caitlin take it over from there. So as you should be aware, previously we had a contract with the Everest Metro Police Department so it was a contract between the City of Wausau Police Department and the Everest Metro Police Department for animal control services. And that was about a little under $17,000 for that contract. So what it was we contracted with Everest Metro to have some animal services and animal control program with them. However, at the beginning of this year, they decided to not go forward with the contract, so that led to a deficit in the budget of a little under $17,000. And with that deficit, that means that the program, as we currently have funds for, would terminate in October of this year. So what happened is the Finance Committee had requested the city to do a reevaluation of the program. And so Nate and Caitlin, they're going to show you in their PowerPoint what they learned, the research that they found. They're going to provide some background as well. But basically, the result of this research was that a one-person program that operates Monday through Friday at an 8 to 4:30 schedule does not work, and it doesn't meet the goals of the program. So I know Becky was here at the inception of it, but I don't know if the rest of you were. I also wasn't here at the inception of it, so not quite certain on that. But at the beginning of this program, when it was started, one of the goals was to increase pet licensing, as well as to reduce the number of hours that patrol officers had to respond to these calls for service. And what you're going to learn from Nate and Caitlin is that wasn't actually happening. So after this thorough review, they kind of found, hey, we're still having a lot of patrol officers respond to these calls for animal control services, and our pet licensing hasn't increased at all, or not very much. And so that could be attributed to the fact that this program is run by it's just a one-person operation, and with the schedule from Monday through Friday and 8 to 4:30. And so kind of what they found was that a lot of these calls happen after hours or on the weekends when people get off work, they take their dogs for a walk, and that's when you have all these incidents. And that's also when people are available to call and ask questions about pet licensing, and when they're available to just be there to have those services provided to them. And so as a result of this analysis and that determination and that conclusion, The proposal in front of you today is to have a new model starting in 2025. And what this model will do is it'll use the same salary minus the 17,000 that we had from the Evis Metro contract, which we lost. So it's a budget neutral request and proposal. And what it would do is they would move from one full-time person to multiple part-time individuals that would have a flexible schedule. So they can work on the weekends, they can work after hours, and all of that good stuff. And Nate will tell you more about that and when you hear the presentation. And you're probably wondering why a lawyer is talking to you instead of the people who actually did the work and the research. Well, after Nate and Caitlin did their analysis and they came to this conclusion that they came to, and they have this proposal that they wanted to make sure that what they were doing was permitted, and the answer is yes. The city is permitted to reevaluate a program after you have a budget deficit, and they're allowed to reevaluate and see what the current program is and if the goals are being accomplished. And if they're not being accomplished, you are allowed to restructure, and you are allowed to put forth a budget neutral proposal going forward. And the reason we're asking to start this in 2025 is because we do currently have a humane officer. We wanted to give her plenty of time to find a new position if that needed to happen, because this proposal would terminate the current position as it is and replace it with a part-time option instead of a full-time option. So at the end of the day, and at the end of this presentation, we're going to ask that you approve this 2025 proposal and send it to the Common Council. And now I'll hand it over to Nate and Caitlin, and they'll present on this. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us. Again, Nate Seiler, Administrative Captain with the Police Department. So on this first piece here, I just want to give you kind of a breakdown of how this examination went. So we learned earlier this year in January of this contract from Evis Metro ceasing. At that time, we became aware of it. Our humane officer also became aware of it. So that initial stage of gathering feedback. So holding a meeting, initially just meeting with the humane officer, just discussing the fact that that contract didn't exist anymore, get her thoughts on that. That was in late January. And then meeting with our command staff, like what is it that this program is designed to do? What are they looking to get out of it? And then in March 2024, met again with our humane officer, just as through an employee check-in. Not really knowing at that time what this program would look like, but just confirming that this was indeed under examination, that we're going to be assessing it. And we didn't know what it was going to look like, but we really felt that the program would look differently based on the surface information that we knew. So that feedback process also involved just consulting with other law enforcement agencies, other communities, to find out what are they doing now compared to what we've been doing for the last 10, 11 years. So stage 2 there in the last few months, it's just been some ongoing research into our law enforcement record systems to pull data and information out of there to assess that. Having some meetings across city departments here to organize that information. As you see, the city clerk's office, city attorney, HR. Reviewing that information, organizing it, and ultimately coming to a conclusion, which was in May, at which time, leading up to that Public Health and Safety Committee meeting, also notifying our humane officer of that conclusion and the resulting expected end of that position in October. So brief history, as Tegan referenced, 2013, those primary goals and the basis for funding the new position was created was really to grow and surge compliance with pet licensing and the vaccination laws. There was discussion around, what does animal welfare look like in our community, pet licensing and responsible pet ownership, and looking at the numbers of, based on how many people we have living in the city, didn't feel that was satisfactory. So one goal is to impact that. Another was to divert the bulk of those day-to-day animal-related calls for service away from our patrol staff so they could focus on other parts of being a sworn officer and demands in the community. So really, with that, the expectation or vision was that applying that added position and attention to licensing, enforcement of licensing with citations and revenue, that added revenue should amount to covering the cost of adding budget for that new position. And then, of course, as you heard, a chunk of that, they're able to fund a full-time person because we're getting that additional funding from Everest Metro to provide service over there. So that framework under that position, you already kind of heard about the schedule, single full-time employee assigned to it. With some summer, we do have the summer CSOs that were afford some help with that. The daytime, typically 8 to 4:30 schedule, assigned a vehicle, which we acquired with this program, that has a mobile computer terminal and animal transport equipment capacity, tasked with the proactive enforcement, working with the city clerk's office to act on license status information to try to be proactive in our license enforcement. Primary first responder for those day-to-day animal welfare nuisance complaints. People complaining about, feeling their neighbor isn't in compliance, or the animal on their block is causing a problem. Strays and bite complaints. You've probably heard about the annual education event, Pause and Protect, where there's also an incentive for people to come license and make sure that their pets are vaccinated.
At a reduced cost.
Oh, yeah, incentive at a reduced cost to license by doing that. This is pretty much review just to kind of reflect that's the contract piece, funding that was lost. And this is the expense budget as of last year. So the added fleet IT equipment that was put in for the new position, the position cost, and the contracted services, the vast majority of that is our contracts with the Humane Society to pay for the non-dog strays contract, and our budgeting for the held for cause to pay for impounded animals held for cause. So under the current job description, as you may have seen, I think a lot of it, this is a repeat, but picking up stray animals, impounding to the Humane Society, returning to owner, found animals, responding to those bite complaints, following up on that rabies quarantine process, any notifications surrounding dangerous animal declarations, and the day-to-day animal complaint response and enforcement. Also with that, under the humane officer role was investigating those allegations of animal cruelty that might be mistreatment, abandonment, neglect, things of that nature. So within that, our community service officers also have the authority to do the vast majority of this. Hold for, other than like hold for cause, they would still need a humane officer or a sworn officer to sponsor them or the paperwork on that. But otherwise, our CSOs are also able to do and help out with these duties. So the position, when we looked at it in 2013, the job description and position was created as humane officer. So not everybody realizes is that that's a statutory title created by Chapter 173, and the design or purpose behind that statute was to allow municipalities to offer a service with authority behind it to take control of animals, to take custody of animals, to give them the legal authority to go out in their communities and do these things without having a law enforcement agency sponsor. So, a county could establish a program, as some do here in Wisconsin, appoint humane officers that are not under any law enforcement umbrella. They're not employed by a law enforcement agency. And that's really effective for some places. Dane County has that, Portage County has that, where traditionally statutory humane officers are employed by municipalities, not necessarily under a police umbrella, and allows them to go out and enforce those state laws where ordinances may be lacking in those smaller rural communities, places where there's not a law enforcement presence to handle those things for them, and make sure that they can respond and still take care of animal welfare, and also do rabies control under the state laws in those areas, all without having a law enforcement sponsor. The reason why it was selected here is that interagency piece. So with Everest Metro contract, in order for the city of Wausau to have their employee go outside of our jurisdiction and execute authorities, this is the reason why this was used, so that our employee was protected when going to Everest Metro or anywhere else in carrying out her authorities. So that's kind of the basis and the background for it, and why there are other certified humane officers that don't necessarily fall under this title. The statute does give some additional search warrant authorities. Again, for those places that don't have a law enforcement sponsor, that don't have sworn officers who can do the search warrants for them. So some of that, it's similar to like we deputize some of our, like our drug task force officers, so they can go out. If they are partnering with the county, they're still covered when they leave the jurisdiction of the city of Wausau. So that as a analogy there. Yeah, and our card officers are also deputized. So when looking at some of the goals, one of the data pieces we went to look at initially, we looked at, okay, what does revenue look like? Is the added revenue, how's that balancing out against the position? So over that scope of time prior to the program starting 2011, 2012, you see there we averaged 70 citations a year. This is department-wide. So this is Animal Code, Section 8 of Wausau Municipal Code. Any citations under that code by any of our officers, any of our staff, sworn officers and humane officer. So once we created that position in 2013, you see the big bump there. A lot of that was really going after the licensing piece and no license citations. But we looked at what's our baseline and where are we at today, and using that as a gauge. So from start to finish of the program, or not finished, but to where we are today, that gain of we're averaging right now 125 animal-related citations a year. Over the last 5 years, 127 per year over this 11-year period. So that gain of 55 to 57 citations per year, you look at our citation rates, right? So max citation, no license fine is $187. If you look at that gain and apply that, our citation revenue is pretty minimal, really. And not that, how do you predict how many citations you could write? I'm not really sure. But I mean, the idea is to gain compliance and to incentivize people to license. But the data just simply shows that, I mean, this hope, desire, vision, whatever you want to call it, that the citation revenue would somehow really go up to cover, just isn't really the reality here. So it's about the 155.50 fine rate. That's for like a no rabies vaccination and some other varieties. But again, we took if at the max rate, that's your max amount that you get as far as a gain on citation revenue.
So when reviewing the animal control program, we also wanted to look at the pet licensing side of it. So I think it's important to look at our annual pet licensing cycle to understand our process. So typically we start in November. Around Thanksgiving, we send out our annual pet renewal reminder letters to everyone who licensed their pet that previous year. So November 2023, we sent it out to everyone who licensed their pet in 2023 for the 2024 year. That letter states that their annual dog, cat and or pet fancier license will expire on December 31st. State law does not allow us to charge late fees or issue citations until March 31st of that year. So about halfway between that, this year we sent out our reminder letter, which this year included a warning citation, which was not appreciated by a lot of pet owners. But we sent that out about halfway between those two dates, reminder that they had not renewed their pet yet. Also, I should say that our chicken keeping license does expire June 30th. So really, between that April through August, those months there in red, that's really our time to do our proactive enforcement, to follow up on people who licensed their pet the previous year that have not done so yet this year. So the clerk's office works closely with the police department to keep those records up to date and go and actually see if the pet still lives there. It's an awful week in our office when we send those reminder letters out and we get the calls that their pet has passed away. We don't enjoy it. Obviously, the pet owners don't enjoy it either. But for that reason, we have to send someone physically to the property to make sure that the pet actually lives there before we can issue a citation for not licensing their pet. And then also, if someone has a puppy or a kitten that's 6 months or younger, as of July 1st, we do issue licenses to those pets at half price. But you can see that the months of September and October are highlighted in green because we don't do much with pet licensing at that time. People who have not licensed their pet for that year, they get really frustrated when a month or two later we're sending them the renewal notice for the next year. So we kind of stop focusing on the current year and start looking ahead at that next year. Oh, yeah.
Oh, you're on this piece. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So furthermore, when we look at our licensing process with the current animal control program, we regularly have a backlog of license inspections. The pet fancier, beekeeping, chicken keeping, and dangerous dog permits all require that initial inspection before the license can be issued. And when you have one person Monday through Friday trying to do all those, that can create a buildup rather quickly. Also, with that, that we can't start issuing warnings or enforcement until that March 31st. We get a buildup also of those say a backup of those enforcements. So I think as of last week, we had about 680 pets that were licensed in 2023 that have still not yet licensed for 2024. So that's almost 700 pets that people paid last year, but they have not paid this year. So if we don't do that proactive enforcement, what is their incentive to be, a responsible pet owner and have that pet licensed and vaccinated again for this current year or years ahead in the future? Another occurrence that we have with the current program is that a delayed response in communication with the pet owners. If they have questions about, when does their rabies expire, things like that, and we have one person 8 to 4:30, like Nate said earlier, not a lot of people are home during that time, and so when they're available, we don't have that specific staff available to address their concerns. And then also, the last point is that another goal, like Nate said in 2013, with this program was to increase the number of pets licensed in the city, and that did not substantially grow since this program started. There was an increase of licensed pets from 2012 to 2013 when that conversation was happening across the city, but since then that has not substantially grown.
And from the police department's perspective, I mean, we sometimes get questioned about, why is licensing important? And for us, it's not about, we're not looking at necessarily the numbers of, how much citation revenue we're bringing in. We want to make sure we're doing the best for the citizens, pet owners, collective animal welfare in the city to make sure that licensing is, that people have an incentive to do it, that we provide a mechanism to promote it, to make sure that we're seeking out compliance, and that, because we know that affects responsible pet ownership. So if we're not out there being proactive about it, how do we ever detect irresponsible pet ownership? How do we ever get in those homes or have contact with those people to see what might be going on in that block, that neighborhood? What are we going to see at that home? So that's why proactive enforcement or proactive monitoring of this is really important, we think, for that collective welfare, to do the best that we can. And so we kind of talk about, speeding enforcement is also really important to people in our community. And if there's not a presence, if the officers aren't out there on the street, what's the deterrence for the behavior? How are we going to change or impact that? So we really stress to our community, like, we want to make sure that they recognize the importance of licensing. Even if there are a responsible pet owner, we want to make sure that we are getting more and more people to be on board and making sure that standard of care of animals in our community is high.
Yeah, and with that, in case your dog or cat would get loose and your dog would bite someone, that you would want to, or it would bite your dog, you would want to know that that pet has been vaccinated against rabies or what the status of that is. And so licensing does aid in that process all around too. So when we look here at our number of pets licensed, I started with 2016 since that is the year that we switched to our Evolve pet licensing system rather than outsourcing it with pet data. But you can see in 2016 we had roughly 6,000 pets licensed in the city, and that has either declined or slightly increased since then. In 2014, your Common Council created our Pet Fancier permit. That is an annual license that allows people to have more than the number of cats and dogs that our ordinance states. And then in 2017, the chicken keeping permit was created, which again is an annual license that expires the end of June. And then in 2018, a beekeeping license or apiary permit was created, which they only have to apply for once, and then they can have one hive on their property, and they do not have to renew that each year. So you can see on that bottom graph about the number of pets, or the different animal licenses we have issued, the range for each of those different categories. And then here, when you look at the actual revenue with those pet licenses, you can see in 2016 to 2024, our annual pet license revenue varied from $84,816 to $119,876. And there was an increase in 2021. You can see it's tan there on the bottom, that like peak there. That's our late fees, which did increase in 2021. We had a lot of enforcement, which also increased our amount of dogs and cats that were licensed. And then we realized that we can't charge that much for late fees. When the program was created in 2013, it was a goal to not put the burden of paying for the cost of this program on those responsible pet owners. And so part of that was like, we're going to have increased late fees and citations to help offset that. And then we found out that we can only charge $5 for late fees, which then that revenue did decrease after that. On the upper right, you can see, or on the right-hand side, you can see all of our different licensing fees for the different animal licenses we issue. Our fee scale is weighed to incentivize people to have their pets spayed and microchipped, and then if you don't have either of those or neither of those, the cost for the annual license does increase. And then there you have those 3 in yellow are annual license, or those optional licenses, and then our dangerous dog permit of $150, and then the late fee of $5. And then here, the top line on red, that is the city of Wausau population from 2016 to 2024. And then that line down on the bottom in green is the total pets that were licensed each year. And so over this time from 2016 to 2024, the city of Wausau has seen an increase of roughly 1,000 people. But our number of pet license has not increased at that same rate. And there's no real way to know how many pets actually do live in the city of Wausau. There's different estimations by different organizations, but the one I looked at was the American Veterinary Medical Association, and they estimate the number of households, the percentage of households in the United States that own a cat, or the ones that own a dog, and then of that, how many own multiple cats or multiple dogs. And when you apply their estimation, to the city of Wausau number of households, we would expect to have about 17,900 cats and dogs living in the city of Wausau. And again, we roughly license about 6,000 each year. And so that would mean in 2024 so far, we have about a 31% compliance rate, which is an increase from 2012, but it's not substantially increased since 2013.
Just going through a couple other data points when we tried to assess kind of the program over the last few years. So other pieces that come into play with animal control is crimes against animals. So we took a look at how many cases from Wausau PD involve crimes that we're referring to, for prosecution as state offenses that would go to the DA's office. So I show you here the last 6 years, 2018 onward, and 2018 is because that's when our law enforcement record system here in Marathon County, including Wausau, changed. And so that's kind of where I was able to get data from going forward. So during that time, the last 6 years, in that lane, criminal cases, a total of 43 cases referred as animal cruelty. And again, that's department-wide for all of our staff. And you see the breakdown there between humane officer and patrol officer being the primary investigators. Everest Metro over the last 6 years, just really only 11 in that lane. With some assistance from our staff. So for animal cruelty cases anywhere, that breaks down to about 7 per year for the entire agency for Wausau in the last 6 years, and about 4 to 5 cases for the humane officer. Of those cases referred, about 2 to 3 get charged over the 6 year time period. But these are also ones where our officers are involved. It's important that that we still pay attention to it, even though it doesn't look like a big number up there. Just taking a snapshot at calls for service. So CFS at the bottom, that's calls for service. Animal complaint is a call for service code that dispatch uses when they get a call from the community that could be a variety of things. It could be a nuisance complaint from the neighbor's animal, welfare of an animal, found strays, accusation of mistreatment, and dispatch would enter it as such. So this is kind of a breakdown of where those calls were sent over the last couple of years. So in 2022, 23, still because of the way the schedule is, naturally we have all these hours when animal related activities are occurring. A lot of it is after business hours, and still the majority is still handled by patrol in the 1 year, and still spread out with our CSOs as well. So I tried to capture some of that same or similar data from the Everest Metro side over the last 4 years. Looked at, try to capture more of the different types of calls for service that may have involved animals. So dispatch sometimes will code a lost or a found animal under lost and found, or it might be under welfare check. It might be under phone message because the citizen is simply calling in with a question or is waiting for someone to respond to their animal complaint. So in Everest Metro, over 6 years, our service down there, and across those calls for service is 316 total calls, 226 with a humane officer as the primary assigned responder, and then with 90 assists. And so how that works on the dispatch side, dispatch assigns an officer to it, right? They're marked as the primary officer. Any other officers that help out on it or also respond subsequently are marked down as an assist. That breaks down to Everest Metro about, we're engaged there about 80 times a year is what it amounted to. Over that 4-year period for our humane officer position down in that area, it amounts to about 6 to 7 call involvements per month over that 4-year period. Everest Metro didn't have a lot of citations down there overall over 4 years. And when it broke out, just the animal complaint as the most common type, just to gauge as a sample. So you see the total calls for service for Everest Metro in each of those years under that category. So 2021, 198, and then you see how many are handled by Everest Metro themselves versus our staff. And year to year, 80% of those calls are still handled by Everest Metro. And this is just a kind of a visual of that as far as, the service or how often we were down there versus Everest Metro handling those types of calls for service. Try to capture and pull out calls that involve stray animals. This is just Wausau PD. The blue is patrol, the maroon is CSO, the green is humane officer, and that's kind of the breakdown. We average, as you can see there, jumps a little under 200 to almost 300, but still the majority due to the hours and the schedule and the setup, those strays are still, and found animals are still being handled by our patrol officers. Oh yeah, there's the little yellow sliver there in 2021 with Everest Metro. After 2021, they no longer wanted services for the non-dog strays, so they stopped us picking up the stray loose cats. Animal bites is another category that gets tracked because those involve a case report that gets shared with the health department, following through on the quarantine process, and there's additional work that comes with those. So we kind of assimilate it to like a traffic crash that a patrol officer might handle. So you show up, there's 2 people generally involved, you have an animal involved, somebody's injured, they're collecting information from both sides, and they have the necessary paperwork to go through. I mean, the system's pretty well set up with the procedure and the paperwork to follow through on that. We track that now. We kind of started a new process for tracking animal bites to make sure we know where those animals are going. We can assess for dangerousness, for declarations. But even with the bites, for the same reasons as before, our patrol in the blue is still handling the majority of those. We're averaging about 20 per year, although we do see a rise in that this year. Animal bites, Everest Metro, looked over that 3-year period there. They don't get that many overall. That's 19 total over that entire period. So after all of that, trying to capture and organize, like what's today's reality? And as you heard from Caitlin, small gains in the licensing enforcement revenue where there was this expectation that it was just going to cover this, and that's not the reality that we've seen. That contract and the funding from that has gone away, and that overall goal of growing licensing compliance, responsible pet ownership just isn't up to where it would hope to be. It's kind of stayed pretty level. So with that current schedule and setup, patrol is still taking a larger portion of that reactive demand for calls for service, and doing the licensing piece to follow up with people just doesn't, it's not conducive under that current schedule to be able to accomplish that when people aren't home. So the contracting piece, we discussed this and, lessons learned from that. Regardless of what agency it is, we can't predict when there's a service gap under the current setup. And, if we sign a contract with another agency, they expect service to a certain level. But if nights and weekends aren't covered, or we don't know when, on any given day when an employee's off on leave, we don't feel comfortable taking off one of our patrol officers from their sector shift to go down and fulfill that service. So how do we, in good faith, sign a contract with somebody without being able to guarantee them a certain level of service? And so without a team of people that you can always be filling that gap, we just don't feel that's appropriate to move forward with that kind of contracting any further. As we've seen, we think there's, it also contributed to some divided attention. We're supposed to provide service down there with one person, and it kind of takes away from the goals we're trying to accomplish here in the city, as we've seen, and it really didn't do much to mitigate what they're looking to do down in the other jurisdiction as well. So we know that the statutory role really isn't necessary to do the services we need here right in the city. That humane officer title under that statute does not, so there's the 40-hour training that the state provides to support that they've developed so that a place that does not have a law enforcement agency allows that person they appoint to go through the training. So, but we can send anyone to that. A sworn officer, our CSOs can, the program is designed to and is encouraged to send sworn personnel to as well to get the 40-hour certification to be humane officer certified. So along with that, those, the special warrant authorities that we talked about under our model, under a law enforcement jurisdiction, they just don't get utilized here. So in reaching out to other agencies and kind of using our network through our accreditation through YLEAG, just kind of seeing what other places are doing. And I don't think we've done this over the last 11 years that we've been running our program. I think it was kind of the first time we really started looking at, over the last decade, how have other places evolved and what are they doing? So our proposal here under the, what other municipal agencies, what other cities are doing, similar size is animal control under a code enforcement or community service officer model. Non-sworn staff, a team of them, so definitely more than one person, and focusing on the ordinance side and ordinance enforcement, licensing, and the day-to-day call for service response with multiple part-time staff. This would, again, be budget neutral. We could hire multiple staff for up to, to be able to provide 15, 20 hours a week per person. But under the current budget, we would get up to 60 hours per week if you evened it out across the year of coverage that we can focus evening, afternoon coverage, nights, allow for some weekends. We can be flexible during seasonal times. If there's, these officers could be not work as much in the winter. If they want to work less hours, we can push more hours to the summer. But the recommendation is that we'd want it to mirror what our current code enforcement, like our parking officer and our admin 2 people are at that $23 an hour range. And with this, of course, we would want to send those individuals to that humane officer certification. They can go to that 40-hour course. It's in Madison. They offer it every year. And we would instantly boost our capacity there. So.
And that training is through Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection.
Yes. So And this is the list of things that we really want to focus on, that just animal control, not necessarily criminal investigation or program management, but we focus multiple staff just on animal control. We really think, and based on what other places are doing, that you're going to have a really good impact on licensing compliance, being able to be out there in the community and mobile, and being able to capture a much higher volume of those ordinance-related calls for service, take that burden off of patrol. So the multiple part-time staff that would hire would really just be focused here to impact those original goals, have that certified training to do bite response, follow-up and quarantine process, focus on licensing, and really for a chunk of time during licensing season, we call it, are here at the clerk's office and working directly through Caitlin to get on those non-renewals. Could still be animal transport for any situation, assisting our sworn staff, and really just being out in the community more as first responders, mobile with that vehicle, and with that, if we're just focusing on this area, and we have multiple people that we can spread around through the course of the week, evenings, nights, we're going to capture those calls for service and really make a good impact on what patrol is carrying. So with that, what other places are doing with this kind of staff focused on these things everywhere, it's not just animal control. They cover code enforcement in general. So so Marshfield PD is one. They're about half the size of us. They're 19,000 people, and their model is a little different. They don't have any part-time staff at all. Like, they don't have any seasonal CSOs like we do. They don't have a single parking control person. Their entire non-sworn staff budget is down to 2 people. So they have 2 full-time code enforcement officers for Marshfield. But so it's 1.0 FTE that is allotted for animal control. So they're each allotted 50% for everything else. They do parking. They help out with zoning and inspections. They a variety of code enforcement in the city. And so they're doing all those things. And when animal call comes out, certainly they're responsible for that as well. But with 2 people, they're also doing staggered shifts and working varied hours to get that coverage and to capture that high volume of calls. So that's just as one example. But we definitely see and are excited for the opportunity to kind of be able to do that year-round, to do more quality of life code enforcement in the city of Wausau. Think about all the other things that people complain about for quality of life issues in their neighborhoods that apply under our ordinances, and we want to be able to back those things up that we have, for ordinances in our community. So some of that, debilitated properties, nuisance properties that our Crow unit sometimes deals with, in downtime, being mobile, I mean, we can go look at those. We can put eyes on. We can see if they're complying. We can see if they're actually coming up to speed or with the things that they've been warned about. Is the lawn being mowed? Is there junk vehicles in the yard, the garbage management, things like that. So we do see more opportunity. So we kind of touched on this. I mean, you really see, under the current budget, we can really expand this. We talk about even expanding the humane officer principle and multiple sworn officers that we want to send to the next training, which is in September. So but before the end of this calendar year, we expect to have 2 to 3 sworn police officers certified as humane officers taking that course in September. So in just kind of polling for interest, we have multiple staff, just like we had 8 people that wanted in on our new downtown officer position. We have a lot of younger officers that are looking for a way that they can make an impact. They've seen how, up to date, kind of how the calls for service impact their shifts, and they want to be a part of it. And we have multiple people that are want to go to that training, and we're looking forward to selecting some for that. But with that, we can really amplify our coverage for calls for service as well. They can be mentors in developing our CSOs that get brought in on the part-time side. So there can be that peer officer resource to have that extra training that everyone else in their shift can rely on. Not that they're going to be taking all the animal-related calls for service, but when something more significant comes in and there's more significant crimes against animals investigation, then we have multiple sworn staff who can help with that and expand our overall team. So with that, one of the agencies we naturally talk to is the Marathon County Sheriff's Office. They currently have 4 moving up to 5 certified humane officers that are their patrol deputies right now. They're not added positions, they're the patrol deputies on their shifts. They look to spread it out across varied shifts so that they had people like this with that certification that can do that out in the county and in these smaller jurisdictions. Naturally, we also talked to the newly formed Mountain Bay PD, and they're envisioning the same thing. They have eyes on this training. They're going to send at least one person to have a sworn humane officer for the entire Mountain Bay metro area. And talking with them and the Humane Society, really see this as what can we accomplish with this larger, Central Wisconsin initiative to have, by the end of 2025, with our staff and their staff, we could be looking at over 10, maybe a dozen certified humane officers in Marathon County, which probably more than anywhere north of Madison and Milwaukee in the state of Wisconsin. So we're excited for what that looks like. We've definitely talked with the Humane Society about this partnership and what that looks like, and they are excited that we're boosting it in this capacity, that there's more people that are going to be involved with this and dedicated to animal control and everything that comes with it. So we talked about animal control. So what happens to the other things here? So we have the crimes against animals piece. That's where we boost our staff's capacity as certified humane officers, multiple of them. We have our community resource unit investigators. They're already involved in those investigations with the nuisance properties where a lot of our dangerous animals are coming into play. So they do have experience with that, and they can still be a resource. They can still play a part with our work alongside in tandem with our part-time staff. They're the first responders, our part-time staff, to get to that initial allegation, but then they're going to have support from these individuals to continue on with any criminal investigation and dealing with the problem properties that are involved. And then the third piece is just dealing with what happens after a dangerous animal declaration. Who makes the declarations? Case management, making sure we're being good partners with the Humane Society, making sure that we're meeting their needs and connecting with them on a regular basis. So across our certified staff and our administrative supervisors right now, myself and I have one lieutenant with me that to kind of manage that part of it and do any follow-up investigation on the declarations. We really we want to make sure those dangerous animal declarations are that we're really looking at them and paying attention to them. We have this ordinance where it can really impact somebody as a pet owner, and there's a decision that needs to be made there whether or not they're going to have to go through all these other steps to maintain their animal, whether they get their animal back. And so that administrative side comes into play where we're going to triage every animal bite for dangerousness. We're going to run it through the process, decision-making process, to see if we have to follow through with that dangerous declaration, and making sure people are held accountable under it. So this is to kind of sum up basically what you've heard. So the reduced budget would run out in October 2024 for that position. It's winding down the position and moving forward with this budget neutral solution, which again, it's all about expanding our capacity to provide animal control services here in Wausau and to really impact the licensing piece and therefore animal welfare collectively. With this restructure and adding the capacity to our staff, those partnerships are just going to grow. Like we've done, no different than we've done with 5-6 years ago. And what did our mental health in the community, what did our response to mental health in the community look like? And what have we done to develop partnerships in Marathon County and how that response has changed? And we see progress with that. So we see this as another opportunity to really grow on what we're doing and to leverage these partnerships with their neighboring agencies, and we'll all do it better together. The other piece that we recognize with other agencies that do this is using that CSO program. The job description that you saw, the proposed one in the packet, it's an elevated position. They have a little bit more responsibility. We're talking about writing more citations, being dedicated to animal control, but having these other officers involved and our certified humane officers, they're going to have more capacity to train these individuals, to developing into our officer candidates, and obviously our part-timers. We hope that those are people that want to stay here and work here, and they can carry over their certification up into a sworn officer role. So that's a place that a lot of agencies leverage to get the recruiting pool up for being sworn officers.
Any questions from our presenters? Go ahead.
I just have probably 3 questions. First of all, I can tell the amount of work that has gone into this investigation of a new program, and the presentation was very nice. Thank you both. We know how much it's going to cost to maintain the humane officer minus the $16,000 from Everest. Do we have a dollar amount as to what this program's going to cost us? I mean, I know we see it's going to cost this much per hour, but do we know how much annually that whole program will cost?
Yeah, the idea is to use the existing budget, which shrunk this year, and we're just going to be able to use that and spread it across part-time CSOs. So like right now, our seasonal CSOs, there's a budget for that, and we need to be good stewards of their time to make sure that we're only allotting enough time, scheduled hours over the course of the year to be within that budget. So this would be similar. We'd use the existing budget to hire those part-time staff, and we just have to stay within it. And that's the reference to, at $23 an hour, that would get us about 60 hours a week coverage over the course of the year. Yeah, and staying within that budget. So that $75,000 and change is kind of the budget we would work with those part-time staff. The additional training for the humane officer, the certified staff, we're not adding any staff. So, we're sending those additional sworn officers and our part-time staff next year to that certification training down in Madison.
Okay. Kind of a practical question, and I don't know if you can answer this, but we've recently hired 2 police officers to patrol the unhoused population. And we did that because there was a strain on the rest of the sworn officers, and so we needed additional sworn officers. Is this, the duties that are outlined in the packet for the sworn officers look to be quite extensive. Is that going to place a burden on the existing staff? I mean, it was my understanding before that they were stressed with time because of the unhoused population. Are these additional responsibilities going to stress them more?
Oh, I see you're speaking to the humane officer training for our sworn staff. Actually, I mean, they see it as a benefit in making it more efficient on their shift, that they have somebody as a go-to when these after hours, the calls are going to come in anyway, right?
Right.
The calls don't stop after 4:30 or a night. So the way they see it, take night shift, for example, if they had a resource that was available to them with that expertise at 6 p.m. onward for at least a few hours, that's a way they can resolve these things a little more efficiently with someone that has the knowledge base. So we assimilate it to, and furthermore, officers, they're seeking to be more well-rounded. They're looking for other opportunities. Not that it's creating more work for them, but the more experience they get in these other areas, the more efficient they can be as a shift. So we talk about like drug recognition experts, right? That's a 40-hour class that any of our officers can go to be to be an expert on a traffic stop, to be able to do the analysis of somebody who's impaired driving under drugs, right? They're not going to be, that doesn't mean they're taking all the OWI calls, right? They're an additional knowledge base for the shift to be a resource for them and to help that be more efficient. So the feedback from our officers is no, they are excited for the opportunity. For career development wise, I mean, that school is a very great school down in Madison. It's put on by, at the UW veterinary, maybe I'm not saying it right, but it's put down by University of Missouri and University of Wisconsin. And there is a lot of investigation experience they get out of that. So it prepares them to be better investigators overall, whether it's for animals or not, but also just getting a better grasp of being able to be a mentor and a leader. So, right, so someone who wants to be a patrol lieutenant or a supervisor, it's another way that they get more skills, and that's why they're excited to do it.
Okay, thank you. One other question. I mean, this is a big adjustment from having one humane officer to multiple, which is very practical. Will there be any kind of a report that will be made out so that you can measure whether this is a successful program? Like every 6 months, are you going to take a look at this to see if it's a better option?
We absolutely want to put a priority on tracking, and we kind of went through a short list of things that made sense based on the past data, but it's not to say there aren't other things that we want to measure going forward. Partnership with the clerk's office to, just like we did here. I mean, technology is definitely better now for information sharing. We already have a lot of that info sharing digitally set up with the Humane Society that, their person can also see some of the things we're doing. So we really want to make that more robust too, that we can use technology that here's this piece of information, here's this moving, not moving target, but this moving project, and that the Humane Society should be an equal partner with us in a lot of respects, that they can see what we're doing, the clerk's office, city attorney, police department.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and I agree, it was a very, very good presentation, a lot of information. My question is you were looking at going from a 40-hour week, a dedicated person for animal control basically, to 60 hours per week with your CSOs, basically, correct? And you were looking for more of those off hours, after work, weekends type of thing. So will just one person be doing that at a time, or, because you talked about multiple people with help?
Sure. So, I mean, in a given week, it provides the opportunity for some overlap, right? Like we could have just flexibility. Say we had, if you had 4 part-time staff, and we have up to 60 hours a week to work with. So it does. We're not restricting ourselves to just hiring 3 part-time staff, right? Just like our seasonal CSOs, we can hire a higher number. It just depends on how many hours they want. But ideally, you get 4 to 5 people, and you assign them. They can 15 to 20 hours a week.
Okay.
But targeting initially, like we'd be looking for 3, right? That can provide overlapping coverage on a consistent basis. So at any given time, there might be 1 working, there might be 2 working.
Okay. I guess my question to that is, when you talk about, 15, 20 hours a week, that's not feasible, because 20 hours a week, or 4 weeks in a month, that's 80 hours. So if you had an officer, one person working, say, from 4 to 8, Monday through Friday, you're at 20 hours. So I don't know how you would allocate, and that's just, your after-work type hours. That leaves nothing for weekends, and that's one person. So I don't know how you'd be able to hire 3 people, 15 to 20 hours a week, and still stay within that 60 hours per month timeline.
Well, just like our seasonal CSOs, you're not guaranteed, they don't have, it's part-time, so it's not, here's exactly how many hours you're working each week. So it's all about the flexibility, and that's what other agencies are doing. So you do have that flexibility that they don't have to work the 20 hours that week necessarily. So, and it is sometimes it's seasonal too, but I'm not sure if I'm answering the question.
That's 60 hours per week.
That's I thought it was 60 hours, okay, 60 hours per week, right,
That's
okay.
what we have available,
Right,
that multiple people could work on.
okay. So, but these hours would primarily be after work and weekends, correct? Or not correct, or?
That's the goal. Other agencies that are doing this, they'll work like a 12 to 4 or a 4 to 8. But one person for that week, like, we might put them on the schedule. Maybe they want to work 1 8-hour shift. Maybe they don't want to work as many days, but or they want to spread it out. Maybe they only want a 3-hour or 4-hour block at a time. But ideally, we do want to focus on the afternoon, evening hours.
Okay, and then my question is, as far as licensing, how could you ever get that increased? I mean, it's short of knocking on people's doors. how do you know that they have a pet that's not licensed? I mean, people either come forward voluntarily, or I just don't know how you
Yeah.
would be increasing licensing.
We are open to ideas too, to get that word out, but we've come up with some ideas to get that word out more, as well as doing this proactive enforcement, having dedicated staff doing that when people are home. We think that will increase the likelihood that people will license their pets, as well as working with the local vet offices to report when they vaccinate their pets, or they also unfortunately had to put those pets down to keep our records up to date as well.
Okay, so who would be working with the veterinarian's offices to gather that information?
Sure. Well, and that's where part of, under the current schedule, they're acknowledged, there's not a lot of time to do that. And that's why we want to expand the way we're doing, so that we have not just the part-time people we're hiring, but there's a component for administration to play in that. There's a component for our certified humane officers to play in that, in terms of that reestablishing and reboosting that partnership with our vets, to making sure that we're getting information. We can leverage technology to get that, which we didn't necessarily have in place 10 years ago. We look at different ways other communities are communicating and promoting licensing. So the website's recently been updated for the city of Wausau across the county. 10 years ago, we didn't have the online licensing piece. We have that now. When you look at other agencies, there's lots of ways we can communicate that more, using various communication methods that the city is already using to residents, to landlords, who know that they have pets out there. There's places that use the QR codes, and they're using the school resource officers, like with their therapy dogs in schools, to really get the message out there at places like fall orientation. Like, hey, we're gonna focus on educating. We go in the schools and educate our kids on everything from drugs to smoking to all these other things. What about responsible pet ownership? Right? There's lots of ways that we haven't explored yet that we're excited to really find ways to connect with our community.
Yeah, I guess my personal thought is, if they're not paying for it to have a license now, a QR code, a website isn't going to make a difference, because I think most people probably do it when they're paying their taxes, for example. I don't think having an online resource is going to make them say, oh, well, it's easier now, I can do a QR code, I'm going to go ahead and pay that. I just think that that's a lofty goal, but I'm not sure how that part is going to really succeed without, like I said, I just don't think people are going to step up to the plate on that one, but that's just my thought.
Yeah, and that online piece is just one component. I think one important component of this whole model is multiple departments, agencies, and teammates and coworkers all working together on this, rather than just having the program revolve around one employee. I think that's kind of the crux of this whole proposal for 2025, is that we take a team approach. We figure out, is this going to work, and we can review back, in 6 months or a year as well.
You also have people that get fines, and that gets around real fast. People do that. I'm in the community, and that works. That has increased people. There are people that, another way is people turn people in. It sounds horrible, but they do. Is your pet licensed? And then there's calls. So, and that is part of the enforcement is, many times with a dog bite or a stray dog, that's where we find the enforcement as well. So there are numerous ways of doing that. I think licensing is just one component. And I guess I'm going to harken back to 2013. I was on a committee to discuss this animal control. There was a horrific incident within the community, and it was animal mistreatment and abuse. And animal people really revved up and wanted some more enforcement. What happened through that committee was that, at the time in 2013, council did not want to fund this position. They did not, we had people that wanted to have more than 2 dogs or whatever it was. There was a lot of discussion. So that is why this program was placed the way it was. It was people that are pet owners said, I will pay a higher fee for a robust animal control program. And that is why the animal licenses went up significantly. Animal people said, I will pay more if you have a robust, so we can stop these horrific acts and help people. It also, and then as you see, the pet fancier license came, other things came, the beekeeper, the chickens, all of that really came from wanting a robust animal control program. So with that, the theory, in theory, was that we would hire a humane officer. We had Everest Metro, Weston involved, and that we were hoping other municipalities would join in, and that would bring in more money to increase the program with more officers. That never happened. That is kind of what stalled. I can tell you that I have received many phone calls in the last year, 2 years, from people that had animal issues and weekends and nights, and they were frustrated that there was not a more robust response, because that's what we paid for in our animal licenses. So that's kind of a little history of what we had hoped would happen. And as you can see with the presentation, it just didn't happen. I mean, now we have Everest Metro that didn't feel this program as it is now was worth their money. So the police department went back to the drawing board and said, how can we make this robust but still stay within our budget? Because we need to have we're budget conscious, so we have to make sure that that equals out. Any other questions for our presenters? Go ahead.
Okay, I got a couple of questions, and I guess I'll start off with, in the job description, is this community services officer too, are they going to be required to get the humane certification?
We expect so, yes. I mean, that's a draft, but that's our desire, is anybody in that position. Granted, this would start next year. The training is until September, right? But
Yeah,
Yes.
there'd be a delay, but there'd be a certain expectation that they would get the training, I would assume.
that's part of the process. Like, you have to be eligible and willing and able to participate in that training.
Okay, and then to kind of dovetail with that, then the sworn officers getting the training too, is that, do you see that then kind of fulfilling some of the statutory roles that you talked about early in the presentation with like inspections and warrants and investigations and warrants and things of that nature?
Oh, sure, I can clarify that. That's not really necessary. I mean, they can already, under their law enforcement sworn authority, they can already do, the warrants that are necessary. If we have a probable cause for a crime, they can do that. The piece in the statute is for a humane officer appointed by a municipality that is not employing them as under law enforcement. So that's like Portage County, for instance, has appointed humane officers who are under that statute. They're not employed by any law enforcement agency. They don't have a sworn officer who can just go out and do warrants and stuff for them. So that's why that's there. So we won't lose any functionality, if that's what you're asking.
Okay, so under the state statute of being a humane officer, that person has legal authority then, it sounds like, to execute those types of tasks. But with the lack of a humane officer, then that would still fall back upon sworn officers within the department, and not necessarily the community service officer. They would not be doing that legal portion of the humane officer role, I would.
They would have the authority to, because they would be certified. They would go through the certification process. They would do the continuing education. That's what other agencies do. They would be certified with the same full authority that the current position has.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so they would have, if the community service officer completed the humane officer certification from the state, they would have the statutory ability to carry out those tasks.
Correct, and that's where, elsewhere in the state, other non-sworn positions, you don't typically, under law enforcement, you don't typically see it titled as humane officer. It is a community service officer so that they can do a broad range of activities. Yet at the same time, as long as they go to that training and keep up on the 32 hours every other year of continuing education, they are certified to do everything under that
Okay.
statute.
Okay. And then, you said one of the, we've got a backlog of licensing and inspections that need to be done. You mentioned bees and chickens. Do you need to be, in order to do those inspections, do you need to be a certified humane officer? Or how are those carried out?
No, I don't believe so. Our ordinance just states what the inspection is for, and so either those code enforcement officers could do that task as well.
So somebody from inspections could carry that out, or a sworn officer?
CSOs.
Or CS, or a present-day CSO. Okay,
So too.
okay.
Yeah, we don't lose any of the authorities that we currently have. We're providing more people that can function in there.
Okay. I had one more, and then it just kind of slipped my mind. I'll come back to it if I remember it.
Administratively, how will this be handled? Will the police department be coordinating everything with the city and reporting statistics and so forth monthly? Or how will this be handled administratively?
For the amount of licensing or
For
enforcement, all of,
everything,
like those
calls,
statistics that we have?
Licensing, bites, whatever.
I guess that depends on what you guys would like to see. We're definitely, we enjoy and we're interested in looking into the data and reporting back on that. So whether that's HR and/or public health and safety or just council as a whole, we definitely willing to update, as often as you request.
Okay, thank you.
I think that updating would be very important because we want to see if this program is successful. Just like you had updated on the humane officer and found that that wasn't. I think it's important to look at if these different measures, so to speak, are making a difference. Because, yeah, you're taking that $75,000 and you're rolling it into this, but there's a lot of money that's going to be invested in training as well. So we want to make sure that that all pays off and that we are seeing an increase in licensing and we are seeing a faster response and not having this huge backlog of citations or licensing, what have you. So I would be very interested to see what difference this makes as a different program.
Well, that's well heard. I mean, we definitely don't want to be back in a position where
10
we're-
years.
10 years, we haven't really examined this. Like, that's what we've certainly learned from this. Like, we want to be on top of it. And we do that similarly with our other initiatives that we do at the police department.
Right.
We're used to that.
So yes, most of it goes to public health and safety, just due to the nature of that. What if HR committee would like it? I think we could add whatever you give to public health and safety and put it in the HR director's report as just as a data point. I think that's good. I don't see us speaking to it unless we have a definite action item. But all dog bites, dangerous dog goes through public health and safety. So, but we can get the data point here. Any other questions for our presenters? Go ahead, Gary.
So, so you're basically just adding 4 hours per day to the, it's 5 days a week, no weekends. So I assume no weekends, or how does weekends fall into that? And basically an 8, well, I don't know how you would determine the hours. That's maybe, I don't know, 12 to 12 or whatever. But so then basically no weekends, you're pretty much scheduled the 5 days a week. Is that right?
No, we would not be limited to that. The part of the idea is that just like our seasonal CSOs in the summer, like we can be flexible and it's not limited to Monday through Friday.
Well, I
That's
mean,
part
but
of
they
the-
would need a schedule of some sort so
For sure.
that you would have a regular routine so that the citizens would expect you on a, maybe a CSO on a Saturday or a Sunday. So so that may be entirely possible. It's part of the regular schedule.
Absolutely. That would be the vision. Like we settle kind of like time slots. Like we plan out like our shifts and what we want to fill, and then we.
So basically 20 hours a week, and then that's 3 more CSOs. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
So with regard to this, is there has there changing to sworn officers' duties with regard to this? So are there more administrative? So, for instance, is your position, or other positions within the police department, have they changed because of this? Because of the adding of 3 or how many CSOs? So does your or other police officers' positions change?
Sorry. But I think part of it is giving some of those duties to people who are already doing that, like people who are already doing investigation work. Some of those investigative tasks will go to them, like admin supervisors. They'll get some of those, like the dangerous animal declarations that have more experience with it.
Could you say more about that?
Yeah, it's not
Because
changing.
because it seems like there's more lieutenants and captains and everybody sort of getting involved here with this.
It does not, to answer your question, it's not changing any positions.
But it is adding to it positions.
What was the question?
Well, it's there. It seems like, and maybe I'm not expressing myself very well, but it seems like there's more
Is your
more
question,
responsibilities coming to sworn officers.
Oh, sure. And I think Ms. Killian had that same kind of question. So similar to other trainings that our sworn officers are other areas that they're certified in, it's providing them more expertise through training to be able to be a resource for their shift, to be a mentor to a CSO. Those officers are already responding to the animal complaints and things right now, right? So this is getting them the additional training and experience to go along with their already trained investigative capacity, right? They're out there, their daily job is doing investigations and criminal investigations and talking with people. So this is another way they can expand on that. Instead of going to a call and maybe not having all of that, we have more people that are qualified with additional training to address the more significant ones that require follow-up investigations. So like I said, we had several officers that are interested in that to be able to, I think collectively it makes the teams of patrol officers more efficient.
But you don't necessarily will need additional police officers then for 2025. You can pretty much carry this out with your own staffing as we see it today.
Correct. Yeah, the proposal is here's where we use the remaining budget for this kind of staff. At the same time, here's how we as an agency provide the best support and service to the community by getting more people through that training and being that partner like in central Wisconsin. So the sheriff's office is seeing it very good. They're very happy with that. They've some of that is some of their experience as now certified on the sheriff's department side has gotten to our officers. And they're like, hey, we really like how we do this and how this functions. And the team concept where they can kind of lean on each other a little bit for more significant cases.
Have we
So,
leaned on the sheriff's department?
yeah, from time to time, but well, in other areas, maybe not so much not the day-to-day animal control.
Well, but not necessarily in the animal control area.
Not specifically.
Okay, just checking. Has the Police and Fire Commission, do they weigh in on this, or is it pretty much?
I don't believe they do, Tegan. They're not sworn officers.
No, so in this case, the reason why this is going to this committee is because when the program was created in 2013, it was created from Public Health and Safety, and then it went to HR and Finance, and then it went to Council. So we're going through the same process, except we won't go to Finance because this is a budget neutral process. So we're going through the same process to restructure the program as we did to create it. So we don't need to go to anybody else except for within the city
So
council.
public health and safety passed on the restructuring.
Yes, they did. They did at their meeting in May.
So they agreed with your proposal to restructure as proposed.
I believe that the motion, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I didn't listen to the hearing prior to today, and it was probably like a month ago, maybe. So I'm going off of memory, so don't hold me to this. But my recollection is that they believed that this was a good proposal to consider, and they wanted to send it to HR to consider this proposal.
Yes, what we decided was that it did pass, and they wanted HR to weigh in because it is positions, and then it will go to council. That was the decision.
So they, just so that so they agreed with the restructuring as presented.
That's
Yes.
correct.
There was a
Yes.
motion to.
Yes, absolutely, there was a motion, yes.
That instead of just sending it on to HR, there was an actual approval, a motion of approval.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
okay. Anything else for our thing, because we have public comment? Is there anything else? Because we can talk about this. I just wanted, anything else for our presenters? Okay, thank you so much. So we do have public comment before we discuss further. I'll call your name. You can come up, 3 minutes, name and address. Thank you. Stacy Wells.
Hi, thank you. Stacy Wells, 319 Weston Avenue. I am here as a veterinary professional. I'm a certified veterinary technician licensed in the state of Wisconsin. I have 8 years veterinary experience in a medical facility. I'm certified in fear-free handling of animals, and I have a master's certificate in animal welfare and behavior from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. So I come to you with veterinary experience. This concerns me a great deal, what I heard here today. And my reasoning is minimally trained individuals in this position. This on? So what I'm concerned about is handling abused, frightened, injured, aggressive animals, and having CSOs and people who've had a 40-hour training in handling animals. Having been in the field for 8 years, it took me over a year to become comfortable dealing with fractious and scared animals. What concerns me is you doing this and taking a very experienced humane officer out of this role now puts your CSOs and people who need to be out on the streets dealing with things that we have in this community in harm's way. And I thought that that was something that we didn't want to do. So I'm concerned about animal bites. If you want to look up, and I urge you to do this, take a look at what happens when you're bitten by a cat. One of the veterinarians that I worked with almost lost her finger due to a cat bite. They're not anything to mess with. Having 8 years in the field, I'm wearing long sleeves today, but I could show you scars. And I am extremely trained. I have years and years of experience. I'm concerned putting people out on the streets and not having continual experience dealing with scared, terrified animals in situations that they are not comfortable in. You're putting people in harm's way. And then you're going to end up with legal expenses and lawsuits and maybe animals that are put down because they reacted poorly to somebody who didn't understand how to handle them. So I'm not seeing this as a way to keep our community safe, to keep our people safe, and to keep our animals safe as well. How many animals will be put down because they reacted poorly to somebody who didn't know how to handle them? As somebody who cares very deeply about animals and has committed my life to animals, this concerns me a great deal. And because I have the floor, I do want to reiterate something that really concerned me, was getting a warning letter about licensing my pets. Don't ever do that to me again. It threw me into a state of panic. I spent 2 hours trying to find somebody to talk to about this because I'm a law-abiding citizen. I pay money to license my pets, I'm a veterinary professional, and I do it on time. And I did not appreciate that. I thought it was extremely disrespectful. So I already have a bad taste in my mouth, and I'm not happy with what I'm seeing here. This really concerns me a great deal. And I'm trying to be respectful, but think about putting people in harm's way. Animals, when they are cornered, when they feel unsafe, they come out swinging. And I want people to be safe in these positions. Do you want an officer out for 2 or 3 weeks because they were bitten by a cat and are in danger of losing one of their appendages and not able to continue doing their job? I think it's something to really think about. And I apologize for going off about that warning letter, but it has been festering, and I really don't ever want that to happen to law-abiding citizens again. But I really want you to think long and hard about safety, because animal bites are no laughing matter, and animals deserve our respect, and they deserve very well-trained people, and we've got one right now, a humane officer that knows how to do her job. If you want her to work weekends, have her work weekends. Maybe add some more people on. But I just don't see eliminating her and her experience as a positive move forward for Wausau. Thank you.
David Bose?
I'm David Wells, also 319 Weston Avenue, and as you can see, I have a very passionate animal rights supporter as a wife. My concerns here are basically, number one, I'm concerned about what priority this will get. We're going from a full-time dedicated humane officer to a sprinkling amongst part-time people. That concerns me greatly. Secondly, to Mr. Gisselman's point, I think it was Mr. Gisselman's point, we already have officers with more than enough to do, and adding a net of what sounds like 20 hours to be distributed amongst 3 part-time positions does not sound to me like an improvement in the attention to be paid to this issue within the city. And then finally, we see that over the past 11 years or so, there's been little to no increase in licensing, et cetera. I would suggest maybe what we need to do is, rather than looking at the humane officer, we need to be looking at focusing more on what's going on in the administrative side of that within City Hall to be gaining revenue if that's what our goal is. Thanks.
Last one I have is Ashley Bishop.
I'm Ashley Bishop, 1203 North 5th Street, Wausau. I am here. I am your current humane officer. Not sure if it's appropriate, but I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you guys have, but I will be sticking to my script because I could probably talk for hours. We need to change the outlook on the success and how this program is evaluated on that. Licensing, although it seems easy to determine because it has dollar signs, does not antiquate what a humane officer's role is in this community. When I give my description, I never mention licensing. My focus has always been on keeping the animals of the community safe and the community safe from the animals. When the numbers were evaluated to save officers from having to handle animal calls in the presentation above, the only way the numbers have been evaluated was by who was primary on those calls. Maybe it was mentioned a little bit about who was assisting with those calls. But the part that wasn't taken into consideration were the calls that I was not primary on or listed on there. The follow-up I would conduct and finish the complaint could be done after the officer's initial contact. That isn't necessarily something that is going to be documented in any way that we have, because I didn't always put myself on a call for those things. If it took phone calls or things like that within the office, contacting the health department, medical facilities, whatever it may be, I didn't put myself on those calls. So I've worked many calls and I've worked many hours on calls to finish the ones that the officers have started. At this time, you're looking at losing several decades of experience, of getting to know the community's animals. Many times I can hear a name and tell you about an animal or the owner. I have made connections with the people where they have shared other crimes going on, and I have been able to bring resources to help them. Here are some national statistics that can be found in the nationallinkcoalition.org. 70% of people with domestic violence that have animals have reported animal abuse. 43% of school shooters have abused animals. 92% of Adult Protective Service reports found that if their client was abusing or neglecting their pets, they were also incapable of taking care of themselves. Having dedicated time to animal welfare is important to reducing these statistics and helping all of those in need. I've worked hard to have the DA's office take animal abuse seriously in this community. I have fought to have people be given consequences for their actions against animal abuse. I'm starting to see the reward of my work on that, but the work isn't finished. I have asked for help from several national organizations and then worked closely with them to see the justice served. Although the current proposal may look good, it isn't giving that much more time for someone to be around to take animal calls. It's 20 hours additional over what we currently have, spread out over 7 days. That's an average of 2 hours and 45 minutes a day. It's still not enough. I'd like to note that the way that this is being presented for how the county, handles animal calls is not completely accurate. The deputy who is covering the section for the county calls that the calls come in for is the one that responds first, and it's not always someone with animal training. If a follow-up is required, they refer it to the ACEs team. This is no different than the officers helping when I'm not available. I have on several occasions assisted the county on calls, and they have stated that they wish for me to come train their staff. There are several thousands of dollars of citations that have been issued and not collected on. From 2016 to 2020, there was over $14,000 that was not collected. Those citations just sat out there and the revenue was not brought in. There are several facets of this information that should be taken into consideration. I've stated over many times in the past 11 years of my job that it is too big for one person. I've expressed that licensing alone could be one person's full-time position. I've been met with, well, that's not going to happen. In the presentation to the Public Health and Safety, which I believe is similar to what we had tonight, it was talked about the importance of having more than one person know how to handle things. This is very true and a fantastic point. But by terminating me, you're losing the opportunity to learn from someone that has been in the field, working in the system for 11 years and over 20 years in animal welfare. If officers are going to be expected to have the extra training, they are going to want the compensation that comes with it. I don't understand how the current proposal will have a net markup of 0. There would need to be adequate equipment purchased also. People are passionate about their animals, and new staff should be fitted with vests that are up to date. That's a whole nother conversation, to make sure that they're safe. Everyone will have to have continuing education credits. That sounds like for 7 people, as estimated, that's 224 hours every other year. There are free trainings, but not all of them are. That'll be a significant cost, especially considering that in March, in the last 2 years, I've been told that there's not enough in the budget for me to be going to certain trainings. I encourage you to reconsider the current proposal. There needs to be change. There needs to be restructuring for us to be able to better serve the community, for humans and animals alike. This is not the way to do it.
Okay, I'm gonna, sorry. The next one we have on our agenda is discussion and possible action to restructure the city. I'm sorry.
On the 31st, I requested to speak tonight.
Yeah, I didn't have your thing. Come on up. I'm not gonna argue.
I'm sorry, but I did request on the 31st, the committee chair. I have an email showing that, okay? Sorry. My name is Judy Lombard, and my address is 149988 Skylark Lane. That is a Rib Mountain address. I am not a Wausau resident. I'm here because I spent 2 years on the board of the Humane Society and 8 years managing the Humane Society. I have a long relationship with Ashley, and I know her strengths and what she brings to your program, and I think it's terrible that you are throwing all of that away. I have sat through this presentation last month at Public Health and Safety, and both times I realized that there are certain themes that run through this. One is that this job is too big for one person. Totally agree. Totally agree. It's too much work. You've seen some of the tasks that are required. Many are very labor-intensive and time-consuming. You've seen the number of hours that this city expects to have this kind of coverage. You know, none of you in any of your work experiences could ever imagine that one person could do this. It's just illogical. Too many officers going out on calls. Yet now one of the remedies is we're going to put officers out on calls, which seems very inconsistent to me and a little bit illogical. Not only did the humane officer have more work than could possibly be done by one person in the city, but then the city takes a contract and piles more work onto the position. The contract fails because you can't fulfill it accurately. I mean, who didn't see that coming? I mean, truthfully, respectfully, who couldn't see that coming? I agree with the team approach. I think that's an excellent thing. You add more manpower, but what you're doing is you are eliminating probably, arguably, the most qualified person in this county to lead that team, to mentor those new people. Again, this is illogical for me. I don't understand it. And what Ashley probably isn't telling you is her qualifications. She's the only humane officer that's ever been seated in this city. She has 11 years' experience. She has over 300 hours of continuing education. She worked for me at the Humane Society starting at 13 years old as a volunteer. And then when she was qualified enough, I hired her. And I was not one day ever disappointed in her performance, ever. She went on to get a vet tech degree. She's worked with the ASPCA, learning how to do animal emergency and other functions. I mean, this is going out. The baby with the bathwater is leaving. Makes no sense to me. I heard over and over, Wausau deserves the best. Humane Services. I want to know how taking all that knowledge and experience and getting rid of it is going to provide you with the best services. That's something I haven't heard. I know this is a money issue. I understand that. Everybody's got a budget, every household, every municipality. I get it. What I keep hearing is that the program failed as is. It failed. It didn't meet expectations. It didn't self-fund. Well, I guess we can have a debate about whether services should be expected to self-fund. We don't expect our law enforcement. We don't expect our fire department to self-fund. This is an important community service. If it can fund partway, I think we should be happy. If licensing provides part of that. We should be grateful. We should find a way to fill in the gaps. And with regards to funding, one of the things I heard was that, of course, we didn't self-fund this program. But I didn't hear anybody say, but we tried. We tried to get funding for this program. When the contract failed, we went looking for grants. We went looking to the community to help us, fill in that gap. I didn't hear that. But I do know that the city can do this because I just recently learned that you have 2 new police officers. And part of their pay is being funded by community funds. I don't know the details, but I do know the city knows how to go and look for money if it really wants to. Program's been tracked for 11 years. Excuse me. I heard a lot of why it didn't work. I did not hear much about remedies. In the moment, how many remedies were there? Did we throw extra people at it? Did we throw extra hours at it? Excuse me. No, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that we went searching for money so that we could retain talented and experienced staff. I didn't hear that. And yet, the proposal is kind of pie in the sky to me. I try to envision a CEO going to his board of directors and saying, I've got a 1-person department. It's not working the way I want it to. Here's my solution. I'm getting rid of the only experienced person, and I'm hiring a bunch of part-timers. I'm giving them the minimal training, and I'm going to make so much money, we're going to self-fund this, and services are going to skyrocket. I mean, I don't know what any of your work experiences are, but can you imagine that that's a solution that you would logically present? I'm so disappointed, and I know I'm upset, and I apologize, but I am so disappointed in the city of Wausau for not nurturing this program and not wanting to retain talent when they have it. You have probably, like I said, the most talented person in this county to do this job, and you have dismissed her. You have dismissed her. What I'm really afraid of is this proposal is not going to work. You're not going to see an increase in licensing because that has to do with human nature more than anything else. I think you are going to see your officers spending more time doing this kind of work, which really, I don't, in my opinion, think they should be doing. I think they have bigger challenges that should be handled by them. Or those calls are going to get dropped. They're going to get put to the wayside. What I'm afraid of is this new proposal will fail, and the city itself will just sort of dismiss humane services, period. That's a real legitimate fear of mine, because I don't think this program failed. I think the management of this program failed. I think you had all the building blocks for an excellent program. You had a talented person who's been dedicated since she was 13 years old, and you're dismissing her. You haven't nurtured that foundation. You haven't built on that foundation. And I think it's a shame. And I think ultimately what is going to happen is you're going to see a decrease in services. You're not going to see more licensing funding, and you are going to lose a talent that most communities would love to have. That's my big fear. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go on to discussion and possible action to restructure the City of Wausau Animal Control Program. I'm going to start us out. First of all, I received those citations, and I understand. I want you to know that I received those 2 citations as well that did not come from this committee. It will not happen again. So I feel your pain. I understand your anger. The other, so we're talking about restructuring, and I guess what I want to bring up is that, yes, we do have a dedicated person now, but with the hours, they're not responding to the situations, and patrol is doing it now. That is part of the issue here, is that we don't have dedicated CSOs on-off hours, so it does land on the patrol right now. I know like I said, in the last year or two, I've received calls with people, on both sides, people with animals that were upset that there was not a more robust response, and people that got bit saying that there was not a robust response from the animal control program. So that's just my concern is I really would like to see this program become more robust with better hours, faster response times, more working together as a team, more a team approach than a one-person approach. So anybody else has any other discussion?
I have these strong feelings that getting rid of her knowledge.
Okay. We have to be very, very careful, please. We are talking about animal control, the position. So we can talk about the position. Okay.
The position, I feel, as I'm not sure how to structure my statement, it feels to me as though this position needs someone with knowledge and experience. And it feels to me as though if the hours are a primary concern, which they seem to be, that people that may be the primary holder of this position could have input as to what kind of assistance she needs to cover all of the hours that are necessary. It just seems as though this position does need someone who has a tremendous amount of knowledge and experience with animals and understands them well. So I guess my feeling is that we maintain having someone in that position with the kind of experience and knowledge that we have currently, but discuss with them what they think would be necessary to fulfill the empty hours that there is no service.
So I have a question. How are we going, so are you thinking of adding people? Because we would have to add to the budget. Remember, the budget is $16,840 in the red now. If we add people, we would have to add that as well to this budget.
I don't know if there has been any discussion with the current person holding this as to whether or not there might be some flexibility in her pay in order to support that $16,000.
That I don't know. Did you have a question? Go ahead.
I have a comment. I do agree with Alder Killian that I believe this position does need somebody with a lot of expertise in animal care, how to handle animals. Every animal is different as far as how they're going to respond to any situation. I guess, and my thoughts are not to add to the staff. My thoughts are that we have currently CSOs, and could we look at how their time is divvied up at this point and see if there is any extra time that we can utilize them with some of those off-hour calls. So I don't know what the duties are of the CSOs that we have, but can we look at maybe incorporating this into some of their day? I still think the training is a great idea for anybody who would be assisting with these calls, but I'm just wondering if we can look at what we have in the CSO pool to see if there's any flexibility in using what we have and restructuring that a little bit. Thank you.
I can provide some context for that. So like your question to our current CSOs, so they're seasonal part-time staff. They're paid at a seasonal pay scale. And so they're right for summer hours essentially. So they're not year-round. We don't have them in that capacity, which is why there's a new job description. So the new job description is definitely an elevated pay scale for the additional training and responsibility to acquire those, those skills, and also, work with our experienced officers with that experience to work together to build that experience quickly. So that's where the CSOs are at right now.
Okay, but we still have experienced officers already taking these calls. So we're going to give them some additional training, which I am all in favor of. If I had to guess, I would think that most of these calls, they're probably more of these types of calls in the summer months when people are out walking their dogs, when their dogs are outside, when, rather than in the middle of January where most people are kind of hunkered down. So I would think that we need a starting point, so why not start utilizing some of those CSOs during the summer months to see if that has had a positive impact?
We've done that for the duration of this time period. So that is a primary role and function of our summer CSOs. You're absolutely right. The calls for service, there's definitely more in the summertime. They do receive that training. They're not humane officer certified, but for years, that is absolutely a function that they do. They do work evening and afternoon hours. That's where we've seen that. Like, that's been a model for us. As other agencies have shown us, like, you take that and you expand on it. They do capture a large volume of call for service. So even with that, over the last 11 years, you saw what the overall statistics come out as. That's why we're trying to expand on that model. They are, in fact, doing that.
Okay. So how would this change then? Would you have these CSOs on year-round? Because my understanding is this is usually students that are in police science at NTC or something of that nature for CSOs?
It's possible. At the new job description, at the pay scale, as other agencies have reported to us, you get additional candidates. Certainly, it might be somebody who's in a criminal justice program or a college student. It might be, we have some CSOs now that are way out of school, and it's their second job. I don't want to call them old, but they're excellent. They have experience.
They're mature.
Yeah, we have a lot of them that stick around because they enjoy the work, and so we have some veterans that are already very interested in what we're looking at doing here and taking on those roles. So those part-times we talk about, we absolutely have people that are interested who have a whole host of experience working this in animal control and picking up animals and handling them, all those things that you're concerned about. We have a lot of experience with that, and we have good candidates that would fill those as is, including, and Ms. Bishop would be obviously free to apply for one of those as well.
Have we ever looked at volunteers to train as humane officers that would volunteer to take on some of these weekend hours?
I would worry about liability.
Yeah,
Couldn't do that.
We have emergency police that serve a specific
Right.
function, but they're not when you talk about, you just heard about what can be involved with animals and how significant that could be, and you're right, that we don't feel that would be an avenue to go down.
But I guess I want to clarify, since the question came up, the proposal is for 12 months a year. This is not a summer position. This is 12 months position, not full-time, part-time, but permanent positions.
Correct.
Go ahead, Gary.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure that I'm ready to make a decision this evening. I think the issue brought up with regard to training and the expertise of these people that get the first call with regard to animal control is quite important, and the following continuing education is part of that, and to be a part of. So right now, I'm not sure that I am happy with a 40-hour or whatever that basic training is with regard to animal control, and the comments were right. I think we want the best that Wausau can provide. I need to do some more thinking and perhaps get some more advice with regard to maybe beefing up, if the committee is so inclined, beefing up the initial training for these CSOs. I'm not sure. But at this point in time, I move that we table this till next month so that I think we can gather more information, and perhaps maybe the director of HR can help us with regard to the education element of it. I think that I don't know what our current humane officer came into the position with. Was it just a 40-hour training, or was it more than that? I don't know what that initial job description called for, or what the training demanded, or what the training, what the continual training does demand with regard to these frontline officers that are that may need to go into the neighborhoods and confront I don't know what all. I know that my neighbors, have complained to me about dog bites and all that, and I sat on public health and safety dealing with that issues for many years, and I think we need the frontline people representing the city of Wausau to be the most highly trained people that we can get, and right now I'm not sure 40 hours is that or what more there is. So I would suggest another month to think, because we are basically the last leg before city council, and I would want a strong, and I would want a very detailed and thought out proposal to be brought before the city council so that the citizens of the city of Wausau knows what we're doing. And that's where I'm thinking today. So if it takes that, I'm not sure, Madam Chair, but that's how I feel this evening.
Well, let's see, is there a second to table? We have a second. I guess if we can take a vote to table, but if it does pass, I really would like you to be specific of what information you want. We had the presentation, and so I guess I want to make sure that we have specifics.
Right, I can do that. I think Mrs. Wells' presentation this evening, I think sat with me, because I think that her emphasis on the ability of this frontline person to be highly educated, knowing the, and that's sort of where I'm going. I would want to know what kind of education is out there, maybe beyond the 40 hours. I would like to know what the current position came into the city with as a demonstration of the qualifications of that person. So I think that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the point that Mrs. Wells brought up with regard to education, future training, a plan for that, for those positions. Is that clear enough? Madam Chair, I don't know if does that answer your question?
Yes, so you just want to know what the position came in with, what the education was, if it was the 40 hours or anything more, a formal education, correct?
And what continual education is part of being an animal control person is like.
Okay.
I think evidently it's beyond the 40 hours
Well,
of
and then what the police department would afford to the new positions for continuing education, correct?
Well, I think how many years? It's 10 years. How I think things have changed. I think budgets have grown. I think if indeed the city council wants to have the best animal control effort that we can afford, they pay license fees. And I think what you were saying about the pet community back in the day, I think that requires us to keep on that same mission. Thank you.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Otherwise, we'll take the vote. Go ahead.
I just have one more thing to add to this. Since we're considering tabling this would be a good opportunity to maybe modify the job description. So we see in there that if we are going to move to this community service officer model, that the attainment of the humane officer certification is a requirement in the job description.
Okay, that's great. I don't know if we can do that unless this fails and we go for a motion. We can give our direction if the tabling. So.
Yeah, I suppose if the tabling fails, then I'm just gonna reintroduce it again.
Right, okay, there you go. All right, so we have the motion to table this until we are in July meeting. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? Okay, that passes. So do you want, Alder Mertens, do you want to, as a committee then, tell our police that we would like the job description for next month to include that the attainment of the 40-hour humane officer designation as part of the job description?
Part of the job description. I know the training is only offered annually, so it has, so within a year of employment, they have to reach that certification.
Okay, he's writing it down. So that seems like that. And we will, I'll work with James and make sure, and the police department will make sure we get that information to the committee for next month, and we can make a decision then. So, go ahead.
One more question. Is it possible to find out if there are any grants available?
I don't know
by
that.
the time? I mean, how would we?
I will tell you, we did get a grant for the police officer, but that was limited. That's not unlimited. So if we look for grants for a position, it is going to be maybe a year. And then what do we do? So that's my only concern about that. The police chief is here. He's listening, so he can. Did you have another?
I do have one question. James, when you're looking at that information, I guess one of the things that I would really be interested in is what were the qualifications on the initial hire? Who, when people were applying for this job, what were we looking for? Because you always put that out whenever you're looking for hiring somebody, you want this, you want this, you want this, you want this. I'm wondering what the original.
Job description.
Yes, and qualifications were that we were searching for, if that's possible.
We'll put that all together. Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Martin, second by Tierney. All in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.